Hello, welcome to the 6th campaign diary for the Fall of Plaguestone. It's been a while since I last posted, and I'm sorry about that. I caught a rather nasty flu for a while there, but I am all better now. Well, we have finally made it. We're finally going to be covering arguably the most unbalanced encounter Paizo have ever released in a Pathfinder 2e module, the infamous Blood Ooze fight. Seriously, if you run this as written, I'm not sure how you wouldn't TPK, regardless of how experienced your players are. Whoever designed this fight saw red when they put this together. Psycho behavior. But before I get into the Blood Ooze fight and how I fixed it, which I'm pretty proud of by the way, our heroes first had to deal with some orc alchemists. If you want to get straight to the Blood Ooze fight though, I understand there is a time link in the description for you. Since the group had made no efforts to hide their approach, a fight immediately broke out. The alchemists are not particularly threatening as they are, however, the environment does allow them to do some fun things on their turns. When stood adjacent to one of the tables, a creature can use an action to grab a random alchemical bomb. These include options such as Alchemist's Fire, Acid Flasks, Frost Vials, and even Elixirs of Life. And our heroes can do this too, if they figure out that it's possible. Our heroes began by rushing the alchemists, trying to bring them down quickly. They dealt some good damage, but very quickly the orcs began throwing various alchemical items at them. This ended up causing multiple instances of persistent damage throughout the fight, which slowly wore our heroes down. Further compounding the issue, the group decided that rather than kill the orcs, they wanted to knock them out instead so that they could talk to them later. At this point, they weren't aware that the alchemists can only speak Orcish, which is a language that none of our heroes speak. So they began to take the optional -2 to their attack rolls in order to make their attacks non-lethal. This caused a few misses and dragged the battle out. As their health began to get low, the two orcs began to flee deeper into the cave towards the sculptor. This resulted in a final scuffle by the staircase, in which one of the party killed one of the orcs, but they did manage to knock the other out. Once the battle had ended, they bound the unconscious orc and began to look around the area. Misha found a large amount of alchemical reagents in the boxes to the east, and they also took all the alchemical items off of the fallen orcs. They also wanted to loot the main tables, but the adventure doesn't give much instruction on handling loot here. Obviously, there are items on the table, as they were being thrown all over the place during the battle, but for balance, I did need to put some kind of limit on it. Since there were 8 items on the table during combat, I decided to let each of our players roll a 1d8 and then give them the corresponding item. Once Namari had healed everybody up, she woke up the orc using treat wounds. The orc slowly awakened, and upon realizing his situation, became very nervous.
Hey, do you understand us?
He just stares at you blankly.
Oh, well, shit.
Do you really not understand us? And I will give the shoulders a little squeeze.
He whimpers and closes his eyes and looks down in fear.
Okay.
Well, this doesn't seem to work.
No one of us speaks Orcish, and if they don't speak Common, we have a problem.
I feel kind of bad if we just knock him out again.
Right. Also, he's so scared. I feel bad.
I mean, they have the 3 people that attacked him, just surrounding him. Of course, he's scared.
Yeah, that makes sense.
What should we do? Do you want to bind him and leave him somewhere and come back later? Do we just leave him somewhere? I don't feel like he's a mastermind behind all of this.
No, seems more like a lackey with some knowledge of alchemy.
Problem is, you wouldn't even do as a
Hostage.
Yeah, a hostage.
I'm gonna crouch down and looking in a non-menacing way. I'm gonna put my sword on the ground, hands up, just trying to look really calm, be pointing to myself, we're not going to. I'm gonna punch my fist, hire you, and thumbs up.
Make a diplomacy with a -4. See, he whimpers and just clenches his eyes closed and waits for an impact. He braces for something to hit him.
I got my sword.
You
I
just
tried.
motion for him to getting hit again.
I tried.
Maybe they understand pictures, and since there's the book, is there also anything to write?
There is, yeah, inkwell.
Okay, I will grab the book and flip for a empty or nearly empty page, and then start drawing. And I will draw trees, very badly drawn trees. So. and then arrow, and then making the trees ugly and withered and like dead birds on the ground and stuff like that.
Okay.
And then point at them like, was that you? Is this your fault? Is this your potions?
He looks to those double doors that
Mm.
they were running for and nods his head in that direction.
Okay.
So the source of whatever is happening to the forest is through these doors. It
Yeah.
seems.
Either that or the person who wants the stuff to happen is through that doors.
Or somebody that's a bit more hardy than these guys is through those doors.
Maybe.
Well, I guess we know which way we need to go.
The question is, what do we do with the York now?
They decided to further bind him and hide him behind some of the crates to be freed at a later time. Hoping to find answers deeper in, the group moved into the refuse pit. There wasn't much to learn here beyond the corpses of many animals implying some failed experiments. They did find a few items such as a cold iron weapon, which has no mechanical value in this adventure, and a wolf fang talisman. Rather than looping back around to the double doors, the group entered the lair of the sculptor through the secret door. Within this chamber are a set of massive double doors to the west, made from stout wood and bound with iron. The pair of doors is crudely decorated with a carving of a small rural village that has been set ablaze.
Oh. Well, that's not normal home decoration.
No, rather bad taste if you ask me.
I wonder if something's happened to Etram's Folly before, years ago. I know they had the Goblin Wars nearby, but was there anything else?
I mean, maybe it presents those wars?
The carvings, can we tell like how long it has been? Like, was it like before the war happened?
Make us a society check. While it looks like Etram's Folly, it's not depicting anything that's happened in history.
Maybe it's something they, whoever they are, want to happen. I don't know why they would decorate like a door like that, though.
Perhaps it's a warning that whatever's behind there could cause this to happen. Let's see if there's anything up here that can give us a clue, and I want to search around.
O'Hara found an orcish notebook written in surprisingly refined handwriting. Unfortunately, the group could not read the notes, so they were unable to glean any of the history that they could have learned here. Had they been able to read it, they could have learned that the sculpture had performed many experiments in the previous months regarding the permanent mutation of creatures using energy mutagens. However, these mutations caused the animals to become bestial and uncontrollable in most occasions, making them ill-suited to become the minions he had hoped they would be. About 2 months ago, Villery suddenly stopped asking him to conduct experiments on her behalf and went silent. The sculptor then turned his attention to his personal goals. These notes also contained a teaser of the imminent threat, with the most recent note reading, "The coagulant thing is finally taking shape. It might not be what she asked for, but she's sure to be impressed. When it's ready, I'll take it to Spite's cradle and show the mistress myself." Alas, our heroes learned none of this. I understand from the return of investment standpoint why solo adventures don't come with a player's guide, but it feels like they kinda should, and they'd be very useful. Knowing how useful understanding Orcish would be, or how often alchemical items occur in this adventure, could help a group build much better suited characters. As it stands, they're missing crucial information, missing out on roleplay opportunities, and receiving a lot of items that aren't particularly efficient to use by them. Knowing Tamily of the Caravan is a half-orc, they took the book for her to read later. The group moved up to the final door. They could hear sparking and whimpering beyond the door. Upon opening the door, a large chamber was revealed beyond. Strapped to the table was a broken, tortured man who had multiple pipes and drains pumping blood in and out of him. Stood to the table's side was a tall, orcish man who seemed to be unconcerned by the party's arrival. "I was wondering when you would make your way here. Tell me, what brings you to the pen?"
Whatever that is that you're doing. What are you doing to the poor man?
"Experiments of the flesh."
I highly doubt he's willing to do this.
It's not really a concern of yours, is it? Do you know this man?
No, but it's not like he's having a nice time. I'm going to step into the room with my sword up.
Well, he's not here to have a nice time.
What are you trying to do?
Create the future.
What does that mean?
The sculptor's motivations since Villery's abandonment, as written in the adventure, seemed a little weak to me. Essentially, he just kept working on experiments because why not? So I changed things up to make him slightly more ambitious and slightly more insane.
As you've apparently witnessed with my own protection, people are lacking in their ability to serve me adequately. I'm going to create something that can keep me safe.
Wait, are you the one responsible for all of those poor tortured animals we've been seeing?
Failed experiments, too unruly, can't be controlled. I'm moving on to better things. Better than she ever thought to do.
Is the rotting forest also an effect of your experiments?
It's a natural side effect.
There's nothing natural about it. Who's she? Surely you've not got some other twisted mind helping you with this.
No, this is my creation.
He pats the man, and the man screams in pain.
It's a simple, natural next step.
Who are you talking about?
My new creation.
No, the she, the one you said you bettered.
My original purpose here was to do her bidding, but I don't need her anymore.
You're still dodging the question. Who?
I am not sure I should speak of her. She still has some control over this area. Would you like to come get a closer look?
Right now?
Yes, she's with the others. Spite's cradle. Come get a closer look.
Honestly, the only thing you're going to get a closer look at is the sharp end of my sword. I'm going to look at the other two, see if they agree.
I will be ready to fight. I'm already pointing my rapier.
More small minds. Suppose now is as good a time as any.
Alright, let's talk about the Blood Ooze fight. At this point in the adventure, a typical group would have 4 level 2 characters. As written, the sculptor is joined by the Blood Ooze, and the party must take them both on. That's a large-size melee creature with reach hitting on a +15 and applies a 1d6 bleed on top of its normal damage, and a ranged creature able to utilize many damage types and also apply a range of persistent damage types or debuffs. Both these creatures are party level +2, making it an extreme encounter. The Blood Ooze also has a 2-action ability that can hit everything within 15 feet and heals it for half the damage it deals, with no limit on how often it can be used. It also heals every time an adjacent creature takes bleeding damage, so not only is it hitting super hard, and backed up by a ranged supporter, it can potentially out-heal the damage anyway. Basically, this fight is insanely overtuned, and I only have 3 players, not 4. So how did I balance this encounter? You might be thinking the best way would be to completely remake the stat block, and that's certainly an option, but what I decided to do was take the Blood Ooze and use its stat block in an interesting, story-focused way. First things first, fuck the sculptor. I don't want him, don't need him, he's gone. As the sculptor let out a long, deep whistle, the bound man's body swelled, and blood poured from every crack and wound available, pooling into a monstrous ooze of blood. The sculptor cackled and grinned triumphantly, and ordered the ooze to attack the intruders. And then, in the blink of an eye, wet, red tendrils of blood shot out, wrapped around the orc, and pulled him into its mass. The sculptor died with a gargling scream as he was crushed inside the mass of congealed blood. Then we rolled initiative. So yeah, first step to rebalancing this encounter is to remove the sculptor. Not only does this clear out one of the unneeded threats, it demonstrates how dangerous the ooze is. Next, we need to fix the Blood Ooze itself. I thought about applying the weak template, but that would have brought its stats too low, so instead I gave it Enfeebled 2, reducing its attack rolls, damage, and strength-based stats without messing with its already very low AC. And then I looked at the rest of the sheet. I didn't want to remove abilities, as that would take away what makes Pathfinder monsters so fun. If all it can do is move and hit, well, then we're kind of just back to 5th edition, aren't we? Instead, I used the abilities it had to turn this from a standard boss fight into a puzzle boss. The first thing I did was look at its sensors. Motion Sense gave me the idea that I can make this creature only see movement and only react to movement. What that means is the ooze will only target the last creature to take an action with the move trait. This became super important because it allowed the group to kite this very dangerous monster around by strategically moving while somebody else didn't to shift aggro and give breathing room to those in danger. This is where the puzzle-like gameplay came in. The second thing I did was decide that some abilities would be reserved for a second phase of sorts. The Siphon Vitality action was changed so that it could only be used once the Blood Ooze was below half health. This would reduce the difficulty by preventing the ooze from spamming heals, while also creating a new level of fear once it hits that second phase. I also put a 1d4 recharge on that ability, and I also held back the clot reaction for this phase. The last thing I did was give it the slow condition, so limiting it to 2 actions. This was because after its to hit bonus, the damage it can deal, the bleed, it was doing more than enough off just 2 actions. It also meant that the room was conveniently large enough that if it spent 2 actions moving, it wouldn't be able to travel the full distance and attack, making the kiting strategy a fun and successful option. However, to give the second phase a bit more of a kick, I did let it start taking 3 actions once it was reduced to half hit points. As if proving why all this was necessary, the battle kicked off with Namari rushing into the room and throwing a bottled lightning at the ooze. I described how the ooze immediately veered towards her as she ran, teasing the motion sense. As soon as it got within range, it slammed a pseudopod into her, critically hit, and immediately sent her to dying with 1d6 times 2 persistent bleeding. An awful opening for our heroes. Misha rushed over to help and gave Namari a potion to get her back up. She also used her action to get Namari onto her feet, which I thought was a nice idea. Wolfram moved up and threw an alchemical fire at the ooze. Namari, realizing how dangerous the bleeding was, spent actions trying and failing to recover from the bleed. Out of desperation, she fled back to the doorway and used Lay on Hands to recover 6 hit points. Unfortunately, the bleed was too high and she fell back to dying at the end of her turn. The Blood Ooze headed for the last bit of movement it saw, which was Namari. However, she had ended up stood behind Wolfram, so as it pursued her, it bumped into Wolfram and its attention turned to him. Trying to test the theory, Misha ran in the opposite direction and blasted it with a phase bolt. Wolfram stepped to Namari, fed her a potion, and then rushed up to the north, seeing if the creature could be baited. Namari stayed prone, fearing that using the stand action would count as movement. It would have. She had enough healing from the potion that she could survive at least one more round of bleeding, so she spent all 3 actions trying to recover from the bleed. She was unsuccessful. This feels like another secret difficulty of this battle. When every hit causes bleeding, and the bleeding is substantial enough to force players to give up actions to remove it, that's actions they aren't using to deal damage. This prolongs the fight, meaning potentially more bleeding occurs, and so on and so on. Luckily for Namari, after taking 10 bleeding damage, she then did recover from the bleeding. Confirming their theory, the ooze veered off after Wolfram, as he was the last creature to take an action with the move trait. It got close enough to get him within reach, but an extremely lucky natural 1 saved Wolfram from the incoming attack. Now understanding motion sense, the fight became more like a puzzle. They had to start paying a lot of attention to turn order and who could move safely to gain aggro. Because of the initiative, Namari couldn't stand up until either Misha or Wolfram had lured it far enough away. In the meantime, Namari used her turn to lay on hands and drink potions. For the next few rounds, the party strategically moved around the room in a way that forced the ooze to spend its 2 actions to keep up. Eventually, however, Misha landed a critical hit that brought the ooze to below half its hit points, and triggered its second phase. I described how the ooze rippled and roared, and then all of the blood in the room, the trails left by its movement, the splatters across the ground and walls, all sucked along the ground and fed into the ooze, empowering it. It sort of pauses and rocks around for a while, and then lets out this gurgling, squelching sound, and all the blood in the room, everything's been splattered against the walls, everything that's drained out of Namari, all slithers along the ground like little snakes and sucks up into the creature. And it is going to be having 3 actions now.
No.
No.
Phase 2.
Okay.
Knowing it can now move further and still attack thanks to the 3rd action made the group have to think even harder about who moves and when it's safe to do so. Wolfram was stood right next to the ooze, so Namari had to move in order to save him. Wolfram stood still and attacked with a spell strike, and then Namari stood up and ran to the southern end of the room. She was banking on the ooze needing to go around the central table, however, since the blood ooze is made of liquid, it could simply go through the furniture. As it moved towards Namari, it bumped into Misha and lashed out at her. She remained standing, but began bleeding heavily. In response, she cast Warp Step and fled to the other corner of the room. She told the others not to move so the ooze wouldn't go for them instead, so Wolfram and Namari pelted the ooze with flasks and bombs. This barrage did bring it to low health, so I began to consider how it might pull off its Siphoned Vitality action. But, based on the fight changes I'd made, I was essentially banking on the group messing up. The ooze did chase after Misha, but it needed all its movement to do so, so no attacks yet. I did note, though, that it was within 15 feet of both Misha and Wolfram at this point. Based on their positioning, in order to prevent the ooze from getting an action left for striking, they needed Namari to move and draw aggro. This meant Misha and Wolfram could commit some time to attacking. Misha crit the ooze again, but this time it used the clot reaction to give itself 5 resistance to the attack. It barely stayed alive, and as Wolfram hit it too, I was pretty scared the ooze was about to die before getting to Siphon. Luckily for me, the damage from Wolfram was nearly minimum, so it lived. Namari moved around at the bottom of the room just to draw aggro. However, the ooze had other plans. While it did shift its attention to her, instead of moving, it used Siphon Vitality, hitting both Misha and Wolfram. I described it blindly reaching for anything with blood with tendrils to make sure that it still seemed like it couldn't see them. They both made their saving throws and both failed. Out of panic, they both used their hero points to reroll, and while Wolfram's became a success, Misha's became a critical failure. Misha ended up taking 28 points of damage, and Wolfram took 7, and the Blood Ooze healed for half of that damage. Misha was now dying and bleeding, and the ooze was aggroed onto Namari at the bottom of the room. Wolfram ran straight to Misha and fed her a potion, relying on Namari to regain the aggro. Namari still hadn't picked up her dropped equipment from the very start of the fight, and while she did want to grab her sword, she knew that it would leave her open to being attacked, and she was wounded too at this point, so a critical hit would fully kill her. She decided to run out of the area with all of her actions. Misha stayed on the ground and landed another critical hit, which it clotted again to reduce. Sure enough, the ooze chased Namari out of the room, but she had moved just far enough that it couldn't attack her. Wolfram ran to the opposite wall, trying to kite it back into the room, and Namari stood perfectly still to avoid gaining that aggro herself. Still on the ground, Misha landed another critical phase bolt. The ooze clotted again, saving itself by 1 hit point. It chased after Wolfram, but was unable to get within range for a hit. He launched a spell back at it, but missed. Namari was still unarmed, so she couldn't attack and just moved around to gain aggro. And finally, honestly really having earned this kill, Misha landed yet another critical phase bolt and killed the Blood Ooze. Misha, how do you kill the Blood Ooze?
Okay, since the blood pillar thingies are in front of it, the bolt would just straight shoot through them, and everything will, shatter. Everything's full of blood, and I just wanted to explode while this happens. Just leaving like a big blood and ooze puddle all over the equipment.
The changes I made to this fight really turned it from an unavoidable TPK to what Namari's player has described as her favourite combat encounter she's had in this game. By keeping its abilities and actions and just changing the context behind their use, the Blood Ooze was allowed to keep the threat and personality those abilities gave it, while toning them down to a state where they can be overcome through clever tactics and teamwork. If you're running this adventure yourself and take even one thing from these campaign diaries, let it be the changes to this fight. The group hurried to see if anything could be recovered from the Blood Ooze, or more specifically the orc that it had subsumed. Since they were unable to read the book and learn where to go next from there, I made sure that they could find the path here. Floating in the blood was a small leather case, and upon opening it, they found a few notes detailing some delivery instructions. They detailed how to get somewhere called Spite's Cradle from somewhere marked Hallard's drop-off stump. Having already learned where the stump was, they could use these instructions to reach their next and final destination.
He really was in, the daughter of the witch.
Well, it seems that this is the way to where she is hiding, I guess.
Yes.
And the orc said that she is still there with some others.
And I mean, we found the source of the forest devastation, and I guess this has put an end to it. So now I guess the next step is finding her, seeing what she has to do with all of this as well.
So we accidentally solved the rotting of the forest and found a way towards killer or the instigator of his assassination. Quite successful.
I would say so too.
Successful. I'm going to bend down and pick up my sword. Okay, it is the least successful moment of my life. I'm so ashamed. Please don't speak of this to anyone.
Don't worry, you did super well. We did all super well. And I think we should, going back, tell the elf about this, take the one guy with us, and talk to the others. Because I am ready for a break.
Namari spent some time healing everybody up, and then they returned to the orc that they had bound. They decided to bring him with them, hoping to find someone who spoke Orcish and could perhaps ask them to undo the changes to the forest, which was wishful thinking at best. As they dragged him out of the cave, though, they remembered the southern pen they had ignored.
Do you think we should go and look and see what's in there?
No. I don't think so. If the orcs don't open it, there's
Maybe, but maybe it's something useful. Maybe it's something not violent.
I would assume it's like a creature that they couldn't use in the battle against us because it's non-hostile or just...
very hostile. Extra hostile. I will look over to the orc and point at the door and make like an opening gesture and a closing gesture. Like wait if he like nods or shakes his hand.
Shrugs.
I guess you could like also drag him over there to see if he gets scared.
He meows.
Oh, it's a cat.
Can't imagine one orc meowing. Sounds like
Meow.
Wolfram and Namari approached the cave while Misha stayed with the orc. Stepping inside the cave, a cloud of smoke hovering around the ceiling becomes visible. Curled up in the back of the cave is a cat that looks to be on fire. It glares at the sight of another creature entering, letting out a weak snarl that fades into a plaintive yowl. The pair were cautious about approaching, unsure if the fiery leopard would lash out at them. They could tell that the fire was hurting it, though.
what do we do? Like, we can't leave it here. Do we put it out of its misery?
I mean, it does seem to be in pain, at least. I wouldn't know. I don't know. I don't think we have anything to like put the fire out.
I mean, with the other ones, that it was coming from them, right? So if we put it in water, it would just set on fire again. I feel bad just leaving it here. Should we get Misha in here? It's a cat. She's a cat. Maybe they can talk. I don't know if that's racist.
Maybe she can like. She handled animals in the caravan, right? So maybe she knows better what to do.
They called Misha into the pen and retreated back to the orc. Misha saw that it was lightly wounded, and also noticed that while this elemental animal wasn't actively being injured by its element, it was severely dehydrated. She tried to give the leopard some water, but it evaporated as soon as it tried to drink. Wolfram used a cantrip to freeze some water, and this time, the leopard managed to drink up the melting water hungrily. The leopard seemed relieved and became less defensive. Deciding they needed to do more for the creature, they led it out to the orc, and through a few threats and no small amount of miming, they got the orc to agree to try and fix the animal. They spent 2 hours waiting for the orc to finish its work, after which it handed the group a vial of blue liquid. The group fed the potion to the leopard, and almost immediately the intensity of the flames was reduced, and the animal no longer seemed to be in constant pain. Happy with everything they'd achieved, the group returned to Nawala, leopard and orc in tow.
You were gone for a long time.
Yeah, there were some events taking a little bit longer than expected. But I think we found the source of the corruption in this forest. And also took care of it.
Oh, what was it?
An orc. I don't think we asked for its name.
No, we did not. It
Yeah,
was
we
an
didn't.
orc alchemist who was experimenting on various creatures to apparently, as in his own words, take the next step in evolution.
Oh.
And he told us that the corruption and the rotting of the forest was a side effect of his experiments.
I see. Well, this is good that is stopped. Still, this is a lot of corruption for one small laboratory.
Apparently he did not work alone, and we have an idea about the whereabouts of his original employer, yeah.
Ah, okay, good. And you're going to go and deal with them as well?
Yes, we will do that. We have our own interest in that as well.
I will go over to her and show her the letter we found. Have you heard about this place before?
I have not. It is up in the mountains, though, looking at this map.
Okay. Well then, we already know the mountains. Better than nothing.
Yes. Good job.
We also took the book that belongs to the orc scientist, and we're going to see if there's any way perhaps we can undo this corruption and the effect it has on these animals. So maybe nip into town every few days to see the updates on that.
Okay, I will stay around. Thank you for working towards this.
Thank you for your help as well. We wouldn't have got this far without you and your knowledge.
She nods.
With that, they returned to Etran's Folly and took a long rest. I also let them level up to level 3, learning from past mistakes of waiting for them to get enough experience. As for the leopard, they discussed retraining to take the animal as an animal companion, but they're actually so scared of it dying in combat that they chose to instead send it to the caravan. That was it for this session. I really enjoyed this session, despite the nervousness I had about the ooze fight. I'm really glad I made the changes I did, and it's definitely become a highlight of the adventure, rather than a possible low point. Next session, we'll be beginning Chapter 3 and off to Spite's Cradle, so look forward to that. If you enjoyed this session, then please like and subscribe. Let me know in the comments how you handle clearly overtuned encounters in modules. Do you lower the stats? Do you rework the encounter from the ground up? You'll find links to my Discord and my Blue Sky in the description. That is all for today. Bye-bye.